turn the audio. Oops. Make up your own words to the music. I hope you got something out of that. Well, we'll play it again. Hi everybody, lovely to see you all here. Thanks for coming and showing interest in MyWorld, which is a devolved R&D program that we've run in the west of England. My name's Dave Bull, I'm the director. The main part of this session is a panel where you're going to listen to some individual experiences and journeys that people have been on. But before we do that, especially for people who are perhaps not so familiar with MyWorld, just a very, very quick introduction and some context from myself. So MyWorld is one of 12 UKRI funded Strength in Places programs. Strength in Places was really an experiment by UKRI to devolve R&D funding in any sector, in any region within the UK. We were fortunate to win £30 million, plus complemented by significant match funding from our partners in the top right box there, and also significant investment through international partnerships as well in the bottom right-hand box, just a few of them there. It's really building on the existing creative technology and production strengths within the west of England to give businesses room, space to explore and to collaborate and to grow. So we wanted to design a system that was not just pots of funding that you could access locally, but was a really integrated system that had layers of funding, multiple entrance points. And we coined this triptych, Discover, Build, Learn, which represents the integration and the integration of an interdependence of facilities, of learning and of R&D, but also gave us that kind of banner, if you like, for exploring how best we can manage devolved R&D funding, in our case, in the creative industries in the west of England. So that's the kind of high level. And so what does it look like if you dive into that ecosystem? And this really, we're talking about lessons learned here, and I think one of the key lessons learned that we have from running this program is how to, and in some cases how not to, structure and deliver an integrated R&D program. So just going through very quickly, I'm not going into details, you've got brochures, there's a lot more detail in those, but on the left-hand side there, foundation platforms. So these are platforms that are funded through Pathfinder research, so primarily based in universities, but collaborative research, skills programs, training programs, facilities that host both the R&D collaborations and the research and the training plus commercial activity and foresight through the MyWorld Observatory. The second layer, really, really important to us, is what we call open innovation or secondary funding, which is unallocated funds through which we can run a number of tiered interventions into supporting the industry, so we can be, as well as planning strategically over a long period, we can be agile and we can be flexible and we can be responsive, right away from collaborative R&D projects, linking universities with businesses through acceleration programs, creative collaborative sandboxes and fellowships and internships. And we're going to hear from a number of partners later who've received that funding in the panel session. Importantly, all of that is complemented by business development and business support. So it's not just a bit of funding, here it is, go away, play with it. It's actually a support mechanism that goes all the way across, right away from individual mentoring to showcasing and to acceleration programs. So I think the message there is a cohesive ecosystem, something that allows us to do strategic planning, is agile and is flexible. So I'm not going to go through the numbers, they kind of speak for themselves, but I think what we've done is to show that there's clear evidence for devolved R&D funding, as long as it's done properly and managed by a trusted entity. What those numbers don't show, however, are the personal journeys, the individual stories and experiences that people have had. So I'm going to hand over to Mark now, who's going to introduce the panel, and you'll hear
Thank you, Dave. Can you just get on the next slide? Okay, so before I bring up the panel, the promise of this session was that we would give you some of the lessons that we've learned. In some ways, we're a slight kind of companion piece to Audra's session in the theatre earlier, thinking about how you build effective R&D partnerships. I'm imagining that some of you in the room are thinking about putting bids together. So I'll bring some exemplars up of how we've worked, but I thought I'd pull out three and potentially very obvious lessons that we learned. As Dave said, we're talking about devolved R&D. We're talking about being the aim of MyWorld was to grow the West of England creative technology cluster, and we invested in technology rather than content. And to do that, we had to be embedded. We have to be part of the cluster. We have to be super networked. We have industry as partners within the program. So we are very, very close to the demand, and we're very, very clear on where we intervene, matched to the strengths and the weaknesses of the creative sector in our region. And that enables us to be more effective. So by being embedded, we can be more effective. MyWorld had the privilege of having quite a large sum of money as the initial public investment, which, as Dave said, we've more than doubled with additional revenues. But it allowed us to be holistic. By being holistic, what I mean is we work across the full value chain, which starts with academic research, goes through the ability to have secondary funding calls. We add skills to that, and then we also add commercialisation to that, plus we built facilities. So that allowed us to have West of England businesses come in and use the type of facilities that they wouldn't have access to. They can use the type of kit that they wouldn't normally have access to. Our aim is to grow companies. Now, if we're trying to grow companies using new technologies, we need to think about the pipeline of talent that they will hire if they grow. There's very little point in growing them if we find there's a talent pool gap when you get there. And commercialisation, we're very much about trying to drive economic results and economic impact. Because Dave said, we're measuring jobs, we're measuring TVA. So how do we intervene once we've driven prototypes forward to help them reach a market? So being holistic was something that is very important to MyWorld. And then sustain investment in progress. Many programs will do a number of short investments into projects, the project stops, they write a report, off we go again. What we try to do is work with businesses who we started off investing small and then we continue to support. And that might be supporting through taking them to international markets, it might be supporting them through another round of funding, it might be supporting them by them attracting other money that MyWorld has slightly enabled. So sustain investment, because that's the way that we kind of develop growth. So I hold those in your head, because what I'm going to do is bring up 4 people who have all touched MyWorld in some ways and developed a project with MyWorld, and we're going to walk through their journey through the program and kind of what it's meant to them and what the outcomes are going to be. I am going to intentionally leave a bit of time at the end to make sure we have questions, because I ask lots of questions. They may not be the right questions that you want answered. So please, as you go through, I'm going to leave space to carry on. So, can I ask my panellists to join me up front? Oh, hang on, I've got something. So we we just talked about being embedded, being part of a network, understanding how we grow a cluster. We did some work with a company called Free Ice Cream. With Free Ice Cream, what we're doing, the big blue dots are places where we are working directly with organisations or businesses. They are where we have invested. We then track the network that came out from that. Who are their partners and how are they connected? We then tracked the next layer of network out from that. So we know where we've invested, we know who they're working with, and we know who the partners is. And then we tracked further, okay, so what's the supply chain into that? So we've got a project, how does it flow down? Who are the people that they're working with in order to deliver the project back to us? So we've got one layer beyond where any funding body would ask you to report. But what it enabled us to see with the first round of funding was that there were 40 businesses who were beneficiaries of MyWorld that we would not have known about if we hadn't done this piece of tracking. And this is a very kind of like busy slide, so just feel the network, but what you're able to do is you can track and turn off and on all of the different locations, all of the different nodes, but you can track international, you can look at different subsectors. But for us, as a cluster development program, it was super important to be able to see this and visualize this. Sorry, not that bit. Right, so I'm going to wander along the panel, and we're going to tell the story of MyWorld. Am I going to ask you to introduce yourself? No. Katie, could you tell me one line about Audience Insights before we start, and who you are?
So I am introducing myself. So I am Katie Martin. Thanks for having me. It's very loud. I am CEO of Audience Insights. Can't say that word. Which is a spin-out from the Universities of Bristol and Bath and a direct result from the MyWorld program. So one of the core research pillars of the program. And we're building next generation immersion analytics products. So, it's not just understanding what audiences are experiencing, but how they're experiencing it. So we're trying to redefine how audiences are understood by turning complex behavioral and biometric sensors or signals into actionable insights for creators.
So can you tell us a bit about the kind of foundational research, the research that was the basis at the beginning of MyWorld?
Yeah, so that came from our audience understanding research. So the kind of three core pillars are around content production, distribution, and then audience experience. So audiences are at the heart of any media or entertainment experience. Without them, like I say, I can kind of give you feedback, but I don't really think it lands the same, and I don't think they pay money yet. So yeah, we're really trying to, audiences just were absolutely core. And then we built the smart cinema facilities, which is our lab, so to speak, and it lets us do high fidelity audience testing. So we hook people up to wearable devices or use remote sensor technologies to capture physiological responses. So we're really curious around where the story or the experience is what's driving your physiology and producing a whole set of responses that we don't even know that we're having. As cognitive human beings, we all think, we've emotionally responded to something in a different way than we actually have, or what our bodies are telling us. So yeah, we're trying to bring that out into the world now, mainly because we were seeing a market response, but also because we could see that through the research validation that we've been doing for the past 10 years, that there was a real commercial application for it.
Can you just step back one step? Because we talked about accessible facilities and the types of equipment that people wouldn't have access to normally. Can you just expand a little bit about what we mean by smart cinema, the infrastructure of it, and what kit you're using in there?
It's an amazing cinema. It's a smart cinema. So that means basically, it's a 35-seat, Dolby Atmos, spatial audio system in it. It's kind of one of the first in Europe, or maybe the first, but I'll let you do the research on that one. So yeah, what we can do there is essentially continue to have that space for R&D. We have the things that we can that we can do easily, like our kind of bread and butter, but then even as a company or as a research organization, we always need to be testing the boundaries of what's next. And the facilities at MyWorld allow us to do that, to have that controlled environment for us to do that before we take it out into the world.
Thank you. Okay, so stepping the next stage through the journey is about prototyping and validating and using this in the world. Do you want to talk about either the Old Vic or the St George's prototype to give the people a sense of how that acts in the real world?
Yeah, so we can do testing in a whole range of content, media experiences. And one of the things that we did is with the Bristol Old Vic. And we captured audience responses over live performance over 10 nights. But what we were doing with that was to help inform the recording of a theater production. So how can you make that a better experience for an at-home audience? So how are you able to extend the IP? How are you able to monetize something that typically people have to come to a physical location for? And that the data that was produced from the live audience directly informed the at-home theater production, and definitely made it better because of that.
And we should be clear that Bristol Old Vic were also a partner in this. So when we talk about being embedded, whilst we're talking about screen content, it was incredibly important to have a creative partner within the city who brought something different around audience experience. So, okay, so we've gone through. We've got research, facilities, validation. I want to talk about the next stage to creating the spin out, or how you decided to take to market and research.
Yeah, so it was a bit of a mix of a lot of things coming together all at the same time. So the researchers that sit behind that core research pillar felt like there was something beyond their research group, so they were interested. Then I was previously in the business partnerships role at MyWorld, and a lot of my conversations, I was literally seeing people like lean in when I would talk about what we were doing in that. And really, understanding the challenges that a lot of, say, production companies are having and how competitive it is out there. So they're really looking for ways to differentiate themselves. So I think it was a lot of different kind of forces coming together at the same time that kind of almost validated us taking those steps. And I think because of the MyWorld program, because of that background in R&D, we were then able to apply for some funding and get it, which really is helping us move from research impact into commercial impact. So things like the UKRI proof of concept grant that we were successful in getting.
So that's what, 250, 300,000 that you've raised?
I wish it was 300, but yeah, it's 250K. We are seeking investment, talk to me after. But I mean, that was actually only open to university, so that's where it's, being a spin-out has a lot of advantages and a lot of access to support that I think we wouldn't have otherwise been able to have, and all that validation through all the work that has been done through MyWorld.
Great, thank you. Well, I'm going to move along the panel. Can you hand the mic to Gabby? So continuing the theme of starting in research, Gabby, do you want to just quickly introduce yourself?
Hello. Good. Hi, my name is Gabby Shinerhill, and I'm a MyWorld Fellow and Director of my company shinerhilldesign, and I've been working with Fashion Museum Bath embedded in their facility for the last 18 months.
So let's follow that line. The idea with the fellowship came from a West of England institution which needed to reinvent itself, and you as the premier expert in digital fashion.
What a title. Yes.
Do you want to talk about that fellowship?
Okay, so essentially I was sort of parachuted in to work with a council-run museum, Fashion Museum Bath, which you may or may not be familiar with. 100,000 objects, started in 1963 by Doris Langley Moore, but I was brought in at a pivotal point in the museum's future because they're actually closed for, now 5 years, at the time 6 years when I started, as they move into a new building. They have, as I said, 100,000 objects. They have them catalogued in an analogue way, but not in a digital way. And part of my research was to work with the small team, 5 people, to work out what types of technology would work for them as a council-run museum, to begin digitising, to unlock the archive, to open up the narratives of those pieces. And yes, so I was working with them 2.5 days a week over the course of the 18 months.
And so can we explore a little bit the journey? Because what happens with the fellowship and a follow-on fellowship because you opened their eyes to it, but the types of technology that you were exposing them to?
Yeah, so the first thing was I went to the museum and asked them what sort of technology they were interested in, and they quite clearly said, we don't know, we're relatively quite scared of this technology, so please can you show us a scope of options. So I went to Camera at University of Bath and borrowed some equipment, for example. I went to Hifle Technologies based in BDFI in Bristol, a startup, who were doing scanning techniques and processing with 3D gouge and splatting. So I basically looked at like a scope of different scanning streams, which I'm not deep into the technology of this, but I have no fear around it. So I basically said we can come into the archive and we can test all of these different technologies out. We looked at Clone 3D, we looked at deconstructing the garment with patterns, and we really tried to investigate lots of different ways of how their archive could be digitised so that it would be able to tell that story online for them, especially when they're closed.
And so keep going, because Bath Spa University's eyes were also opened, as well as the Fashion Museum. So I suppose what I'm trying to tease out of Gabby here is this idea that we seeded something with someone who was a partner in the West of England, and then every step opened their eyes to a bit further and a bit further, and we could keep moving forward.
So yeah, I was embedded with the museum. I was housed under Bath Spa, who were working through their partnership with the museum at the time. And as I was showing Bath Spa University and those stakeholders in the heritage sector in Bath, as I was showing them the different technologies, they were talking to each other beyond me and seeing a validation for the research that essentially I was doing. So you had the head of heritage services at Bath Spa, whose job is to hold the Roman baths and the museum. You had the VCs at Bath Spa University who were seeing validation of the research we were doing. And then you also had the museum who were actually sort of seeing the benefit and the value of working with different technology providers, and were working directly with creative technologists who are willing to kind of like expand the archiving of the museum. So within that space, between sort of like Bath, Bristol and Warminster, we were working with many different regional creatives, but also many different industries as well. And that supported my research greatly, obviously.
And just following on from, we were talking about skills earlier, the idea that the research and the technology and the things that we're doing then net out in the kind of skills development. Can you talk a bit about the kind of educational skills echo?
So in the first, I had 2 fellowships actually. I had a 10-month fellowship and a follow-on 6-month fellowship. And in the follow-on fellowship, I was really keen to actually be showing the outcomes of the scanning through to audiences. So with the museum, who were actually taking part in their own Explore the Collection research, all of the scanning outcomes were shown to around about 4,000 people locally. I didn't meet all of those 4,000 people. I probably met about 300 of them on different public engagement days I did. And through that, we then discovered, after talking to Bath and North East Somerset Council, that there was a real thirst and need and desire for developing skills around digitisation, digital fashion, pattern deconstruction, garment disassembly. So we've brought together a few people to do a crowdsourced scanning proposal in February, where we're working with a group of young people to teach them how to scan solid objects in the museum, and we'll be scanning, I think, upwards of 100 pieces, and that's a piece of work where they'll be learning how to use Polycam, they'll be learning data entry, they'll be learning how to enter the metadata, and also interacting with objects in the museum as well. So from my initial sort of like research with the museum, we're able to go to the council and say there is need, desire and want for these skills. How can we spread that wider within the region?
Perfect, thank you. Rob, I'm going to bring you in now. So one of the lessons we learned was have industry embedded. Make sure that the people who are in the room are advising you of what's happening out there and enable you to then be agile with the program. Rob, do you want to talk about the fact, well, first of all, introduce yourself, Rob, and your company, and then talk about being one of the partners within the program.
Sure. My name is Rob Hifle, CEO and Creative Director of Aeterna. Aeterna creates high-end visual effects for film and TV and immersive experiences We work for clients such as Netflix, Apple, BBC, do a lot of BBC work. And I was brought in at really the inception and as a partner, and it enabled us to create a creative technology department within Aeterna, and that was just amazing for us. How we work, we work through a pipeline. We have multiple people at every single stage working on aspects of the visual effects, and they're very defined skill sets, and it's complex and it's expensive, and to be able to bring some of that expertise to the sheds. You talked about the building of the sheds. It's a very complex piece of kit, isn't it, the facility. So it's all worked both ways. We could help out with some of the validation of what was being produced into our pipeline, but also use it for productions, and there's some very successful boot camps that happened.
We use the word sheds as a shorthand. Sheds is the studio facility that was built in Bristol. There are some pictures going up behind. Inside the sheds there's LED volume, volcap, mocap, smart cinema that Katie discussed. There's also a 360 LED cave and the ability to kind of be a live broadcast studio. So I suddenly realised I kept talking about accessible facilities without telling you what they were. And we call them the sheds just for shorthand.
And I was a part of the creative steer for experimental productions with Arden and Bristol Vic. So I think experimental productions is very much the sort of storytelling heart of MyWorld. And our remit, I suppose, was to create stories with emerging tech. So we had a pot of money in order to make that happen.
And so this is the value add of having Lux, Ardman in the room. Because at the time everybody's talking about AI and not really quite understanding how AI fits, and yet we're working with two globally significant partners who are effectively running their own R&D programs inside the company to understand how AI hits your workflow, or how AI came into their or VP came into their workflow process. Do you want to just step on from the R&D and into the film that you were making?
Yeah, so it went through quite a rigorous procedure where we all had the opportunity to pitch projects. And I actually took one of the largest funds, which was match funded. So just going back to the devolvement of funding, because what's been brilliant is that I suppose it's all about trust and partnership, and it's a large significant amount of money, and this is public money. So the fact that I'm match funding, or we're match funding as well, it means that every pound is well spent, every penny is well spent. So there's a rigorous sort of procedure, and Reno got commissioned as a currently 23-minute drama, sci-fi drama. Because we work with Netflix, we're trying to sort of move more into that area. It's a big audience for sci-fi. It's their biggest audience, and they're expanding their portfolio with that type of work. So we just thought there was an opportunity there. So I wrote it with Aeterna, and that opened certain doors. She's a writer with Idris Elba, and that was over about 8 months. And then we started doing lots of testing in the VP studio. I mean, when we started the project, it wasn't even built. So there was a lot of testing, lots of camera testing, and in the end you become an expert in it. We spent like months in and out of that facility, and then engineer the workflow in order to push a drama through it. Which I've just finished cutting, but we're just adding all the visual effects in and the music as we speak.
And so just to expand that point, there's a kind of learning by doing thing here. Dave talked about personal stories. MyWorld funds scholars who wouldn't be able to afford to do an MA course to go, to come into our kind of environment. one of the scholars has done the sound
That's right.
composing on your film. So it's about creating this kind of like this self-sustaining vortex and bringing experience into it.
But somebody sent me the credit list to sign off yesterday. There's 103 people on the credits. So, you know, we've touched quite a lot of other companies in Bristol, as well as the scholars and those fellowships. But we tried to make that pound work really hard and make sure that loads of people are involved in it. And I suppose that partnering is really important. You know, forget about the film. The boot camps have been incredibly successful. And we've talked about our process, about the filmmaking process in VP to those people that are coming into very green into that VP environment. We've shown them how we've integrated some of those processes into a visual effects pipeline, and they've done tours of our company. So, you know, there's a symbiotic relationship here, and I think we've sort of grown together. That's how we sort of support each other, and that's how I see it.
Okay, so last sentence, what was the commercial impact for Aeterna going forward?
There's quite a few different threads here. I'll be as quick as possible. One is our pipeline. We managed to do a lot of R&D with machine learning. We've had the opportunity to do that with the MyWorld money. So we're speeding up our pipeline. I'm not going to go into Gen AI because it's just too much of a sort of hornet's nest of our clients. But we have been at the core phase with Gen AI. It's just that we haven't been able to integrate it with a lot of other programs that we work on. But again, we've been able to sort of navigate that. I think what I want to do with the film is open up another genre for us. I think it's a brilliant showcase for the facility. And we're going to put it on the festival market. But in a way, the visual effects that we push through the film are hopefully going to expand our portfolio.
Thanks, thank you. Can you pass the microphone on to Ben? Ben, say who you are, Ben, what you do.
Hi everyone, let's do that. I'm Ben Ackland. I'm co-founder of Mean Machine. We are a game and tech studio based in Bristol. We are trying to cut through the slop of generative AI for the creative industries and create toolings and systems that deliver authored premium AI characters and quests for games and immersive.
Thank you. So when we met you, it was very early on in MyWorld's life. Do you want to talk about, you pitched into a funding call that we pulled out, which we remembered was called the Challenge Call. Mm-hmm. Do you want to talk about that quickly, just to set the scene of where we met you on the journey?
Absolutely. So my co-founder and I have been experimenting with conversational AI and other ways of talking to games, voice controlling games, and we're very keen to try and pursue this as an avenue. MyWorld had a challenge call, which was at the time in partnership with NVIDIA. So you mentioned you have some industry partners along the way. So the setup here is that NVIDIA and MyWorld pose a challenge to, I guess, businesses in the Southwest. And that challenge was to connect creative processes, I guess, with AI and cutting edge technology. And so we felt in a strong position to apply for that, with our background exploring pre-generative AI technologies and being in the creative industry and actually putting out creative content. So happy to talk about where that led.
Yeah, I think so. We should also acknowledge Digital Catapult were in the room, and they were part of that challenge call.
Absolutely.
Video. So again, bringing a partnership which brings more value together. But anyway, yes, when did it lead to?
What that allowed us to do was it was quite tight. It was a 16-week program, which was great. It was very structured. There were sort of 4 key milestones where our progress was reviewed, and so we went through a process effectively of prototyping both technology and the next sort of iteration of these experiences to show what was possible. And that was kind of steered by the growing community around us through Digital Catapult and MyWorld, but also through the conversations with NVIDIA. We were learning about their perspective on what was going on in the industry. We were feeding in our ideas, and that helped shape that. And what came out of that there were lots of things, but two key things were some tooling for the Unity game engine that allowed you to put an AI character in the game, and an example game, which is Dead Meat, which has gone on to be very popular and almost it's a trademark of what we're doing and what our vision is for this in games.
We talked last night, you talked about the word unlock, which I really liked, and the idea that this phase unlocked your ability to show what you were doing, and then MyWorld came again with some more investment in order to then really start to build it out.
Yeah, definitely. So from an unlocking point of view, we were encouraged through the MyWorld program to talk about what we were doing, to show demos, to show off what we were doing, and that was within the community, which was great. So we had this sort of closed platform of 30 or 40 peers, some of whom are here today, and then more broadly things like the showcasing opportunities that MyWorld organised through other channels like events, etc. And obviously what that did, it established some credibility for us for what we were doing. It gave us an opportunity to show other people what we're doing and open doors. And so that ultimately led to a couple of key things. Maybe jumping the gun a little bit here, I don't know quite what you want me to cover, but it led to a couple of key things. The first was some angel investment, which was a reasonable amount of money for our startup, which allowed us to go much further with what we're doing and actually, in part, get to where we are today. It also unlocked some follow-up funding, going back to the point you raised earlier. It was almost clear, it was certainly communicated through the MyWorld program that this was very much opportunity of stage support, and the follow-on funding was collaborative research and development funding. So over the course, I guess, of the first year of being in the ecosystem, we created a load of relationships, and one of those relationships was becoming stronger and stronger was with the University of Bristol, being based in Bristol. And the CRMD2, Collaborative R&D second round of MyWorld funding, was a reasonable amount of money, £250,000, and we matched that, I think, 30%, if I recall. And that really allowed us to go deep over a 12-month period into further research and technical development around our foundational prototype, which we proved out under the previous challenge call. And we would, even at the stage we are now, revenue generating, growing business, we still wouldn't have that kind of money to invest in that kind of activity. So it was a huge kind of unlock. And a couple of the key things there are, not only did we have some funding to advance our technology, which was crucial, and securing that funding also helped, by the way, secure the angel investment, because they saw that as almost a sort of match in a way. But furthermore, having a university of experienced researchers validate what you're doing with a sizable audience, 60, 70 players, a couple of hours each. An immense amount of data there, immense amount of validation, and obviously we're starting to be able to take that out and share that with people. And so
let's hang on. Let's you pause. So I'm going to pick up that point. Firstly, I think with Lux and with Meaning Machine, I think what you're seeing is that there's a start point, and then hopefully what we're seeing, there's a big investment. So we're saying we've validated this. Let's really go because it's got massive potential. Going out into the world, we have a form of funding called springboard funding. If you're creating something, you want to find a market, how do you get it in front of people? Often that tiny little bit of money that gets you on an aeroplane is the hardest to find. Then with MyWorld, you've gone to GDC, with South by Southwest, and also developed. Do you want to just talk about that exposure?
Yeah, absolutely. So that springboard funding is quite discreet. It's about, for us, it's about getting out there and having the opportunity to talk about what you're doing. And in all of those cases, it's not something we probably could have funded ourselves, which is why we applied for the funding. The opportunity there, let's start with Develop is the UK's biggest games conference. It was an opportunity for us for both me and my co-founder to go. There's a reasonable cost to going to show off what we were doing to that audience, to be present there for 3 or 4 days, and to cut a long story short, fundamentally we ended up winning an award voted for by game developers for dead meat and the promise of dead meat, which is a conversational interrogation game. And this was, the games industry is reasonably hostile to AI, that's generative AI, and that's fair enough. AI isn't just, there's not just one type of AI, there's good, bad, and everything in between. And for us, it felt like the industry recognized the mission we were on, to cut through the slop, to create something that authors could control, to go, to add to games rather than to replace. And so that was a huge signal, a huge validation, and that effort was supported by the Springboard Fund. And very briefly, to touch on the other two opportunities, there was South by Southwest, which is obviously a US trip, so reasonable costs, etc. Again, great opportunity in collaboration with DC as well. Huge opportunity to have a platform there and share with a wide audience in the US and actually start to enter that market. So start to have conversations with US-based businesses, etc. And then GDC, again, it unlocked the ability for us to take someone else there. So in this case, it was that we had an opportunity to speak on NVIDIA's stage, but we would otherwise not be present at the event if we couldn't take that third person with us. So the Springboard Fund funded having someone present on the ground through all of the event, through all the investor meetings, through all the networking, which is hugely valuable. Otherwise, I think, we would have missed our opportunity there.
So trying to draw out here an exemplar of the kind of layeredness. So we start at one point and then we kind of validate through, then you bring in angel investment, you bring in other investment, and something started today with Punch Drunk?
Absolutely. So we've been working with Punch Drunk on a new type of immersive experience, which is a sort of crossover between immersive theatre, which obviously they excel at, and video games. And this is a live action game, it's called Land 23, opens tonight in London, it's been previewing the last few weeks. And this is a game that has conversation at its heart. My co-founder gave a lightning talk on it yesterday here, I don't know if I recorded. But that's one example of a handful now of big, respected creatives that we're working with as a result of this sort of 3-year journey of going from prototype out into the marketplace and being validated again and again.
Yeah, work with enormous companies, you must all book tickets next time. And just to reinforce that thing about going to market, Gabby and Rob, you've both been to South by Southwest. Katie was just with me in Slush in Finland. We kind of feel it's a very small amount of money, but a really significant amount of money. If someone can convince us that they can take something to a trade show they can't afford and do a deal there. It's a really small bit of the budget, but super, super impactful. We've had other people go out to a visual effects company who were working in audio AI, went up to Copenhagen, got investment, their original investor doubled their investment because they could see everybody else liked it. It's those things that put people in market. As I say, I've got lots of questions, but I'm assuming you might have some questions because I've been talking a lot, we've been talking a lot. Anybody want to ask a question of the panel, or there are other representatives of MyWorld here on the operations side, on the marketing side, if you want to ask anything which might be useful for your bid. No? Okay, that's fine. We can carry on. Gabby?
I've not got a question, but I've got something I'd like to say.
Yeah, because that's what I said.
Yeah,
Come to you 1 second. Oh, no, okay, yeah, come to you now.
Ask your question first.
I suppose it's about like the scale of the opportunity, which is like super clear now, and you can sit here in retrospect. But for those of us who are thinking about building bits, it's like trying to identify what the scale of the economic and social benefit is going to be, and like how aware were you before like while putting the bid together, and like how were the potential partners involved in sort of identifying that for you?
Yeah, I'll come to you. The one thing I will say, the funding was Strength in Places funding. And so there was already this foundation to build, and so there was a great belief that there was a kind of globally significant cluster to build on. Dave, do you want to talk to that?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things. I mean, Strength in Places, I don't know how familiar people are with the UK Arts Strengthened Places programme. It was done 2 rounds, but something that was pretty unique about it was it had an expression of interest phase, but it ended up in the first wave that we were funded, it funded 7 projects, but it shortlisted 23, I think, out of kind of, I understand, a couple hundred bids from various regions and various sectors. And the uniqueness about it was actually those projects that were shortlisted were given £50,000 to over 6 months to actually explore the sort of things that you're talking about. So we work with economists. It allowed me and colleagues, Mark and many others to meet some of these fantastic people and a lot of others to create international collaborations, to work with partners like Digital Catapult to build that model. And as Mark said, we had before that, we had a very kind of strong idea of what we wanted to do because we knew where the gaps were. We've been talking about it for a long time. There just weren't opportunities to do it. We had strong technical relationships with people in Silicon Valley and Far East and Australia and wherever. But actually, from the kind of high value technical stuff, especially, that wasn't happening in Bristol. What we did have, we were building things like clusters, which were smaller investments focused on accelerating. But we didn't have that more holistic kind of view. So it allowed us to do 2 things. It allowed us to kind of refine the model. And actually, the model we ended up with was not that different. It had a lot of refinements and details, but it wasn't that different to what we put in the bin, to be honest with you. So we kind of, we had reasonably good insight. But that £50,000, which I'm not aware of many other programs that give you, that amount of money to develop a full bit. So that was brilliant.
More questions?
So I was just going to say, for anyone who's in the audience who's also thinking about moving into this space, as a fellow, what I also got from MyWorld is the scaffolding and the structure and support I had was really, really strong. So I had a producer who was essentially a mentor who could signpost me to all of the right companies and people within the network. I had a scope of different industries to talk to that was almost like I guess a pre-approved menu of places to go. And also the reporting on my side as like an active researcher who was creating work and having to output work and show work to many stakeholders continuously. The reporting that I had to do was relatively light, I understand, from if we look at other types of fellowships. So I was almost encouraged to research, show an outcome, iterate, move on, and someone was almost alongside me taking that information and writing it up into a report, which was really helpful for me, which meant that I could actually do a lot of work in 10 months and half a week, basically, and then a lot of work again for the 6-month fellowship. So yeah, I just wanted to add that point.
Thank you. Cool. Thanks,
Can I just say something in response to your question? I think just some of the basics behind the program are like really high targets of KPIs that helps kind of keep people operating to the goal, which is really useful. But something that kind of came after the fact was creating an agile fund and creating space to pursue opportunities that you cannot know are going to be there when you're filling out an application for funding. I think that was a big learning for us, and to be responsive, because for the MyWorld program, I think it was in 2020 or something, then technology changes at such a pace that like what you've written in 2020 is definitely going to be different in 2025. So I think that was something that was really cleverly done in the program, was have those targets and have that structure so people have something that they're working toward, but to create that space and to be responsive with industry partners or with different programs that come up through skills or whatever it might be.
I think that's a really important point. It was mentioned by Richard from Music Futures on the stage earlier about the difficulty of agility, because sometimes the process slightly kills your ability to, and this kind of structural funding kills your ability to be very, very agile and move where you'd like to. So you have to protect that ability really very carefully. There's one point which Katie, you're holding the microphone, so you're going to answer this, is about being a good neighbour. So we had a very large sum of money into an existing, successfully commercial ecosystem. And so you have to be very, very careful that you're not A, distorting or B, competing. So we work very hard on that local network and becoming a good neighbour and a contributing part of it rather than a drone. Do you want to just talk about what you did working with the networks?
Yeah, I think that sort of being in Bristol or being in west of England is that kind of is a natural way that people operate there, so it's really, really lovely. But in my business partnerships role in MyWorld, I could see people were like, picking up the phone wanting to engage, but there was almost a level of skepticism, rightfully so, that sat behind them. So the types of questions that they were asking, you kind of had to read in between the line, but we had to do a lot of reassuring people that this isn't, the commercial is not the driver of what we're doing, and what we're trying to do is build the talent pool that they can access, the access to new technologies, so they don't have to invest in those themselves. They can come and they can mess around with it, providing that collaborative kind of safe space, if you will. But then bringing people in, a project like this runs quite lean. You don't tend to have the full size of the tech team that you might need to run a studio space, a smart cinema space, etc. So we were really deliberate and kind of throwing out opportunities to local businesses to collaborate, to bring them in, to get them paid as a part of some of our projects that we delivered. And I think that's worked really, really well. And now we can pick up the phone to each other quite easily. And you had to be deliberate about that, as well as just knowing that that's how people in the West of England prefer to do business.
And kind of by extension to that, there's funding in many regions called skills boot camps. And so we have become the kind of base for training around in-camera visual effects in the West of England, because there are no courses that do that currently. So we were able to provide the facilities and the momentum of doing it. So again, another way where we're using other people's money but our location in order to contribute.
Thank you. So this is a question about Dave. It's something you mentioned this morning, but then more context was brought to it this afternoon. You spoke about the interdependency of these three core pillars in the diagram there, and how you had to fight back against that, looking over ambitions. But I wondered, given the infrastructure that you had already, and the fact that funds have attracted further funds and industry co-investment and so on, are all of the things in this diagram funded through the cluster? Or so just picking skills, for instance, did skills come from a commitment from the local authority? Were you able to, at the point of application, express things that were actually coming from other funding sources? Or are all of these things clusters funded?
No, the skills training and the boot camps that Mark mentioned, I said this morning, there's a really strong collaboration between the West of England Environmental Authority and MyWorld. We've been talking about this for a long time, but actually, skills is a really big thing within the region. Obviously, skills is so interrelated with facilities. You need facilities to train people in current emerging technologies. So I think they've probably invested about 600,000 on top of MyWorld funding. The other thing I would say, and I'm not sure if I mentioned this morning on the panel, is that what we've done, not just in training, but in R&D collaboration and other things as well, is brought in a lot of external partners now. Our funding is not restricted to the West of England, but it's spent for the benefit of the West of England. That doesn't mean we pay big tech giants to work with us, so they bring things to us. So the training, for example, is good. So the training, the boot camps, that combination with the West of England Environmental Authorities allowed us to attract Sony, Luxmac, and many other big companies who come in. They bring a lot with it as well in terms of reputation and credibility. And also that kind of collaboration really allowed us to focus a lot on underrepresented groups as well in terms of kind of skills issues. which is important. But equally, outside of training on the collaborative R&D and the challenge programs as well. I mean, Catapult brought in video. It's not just a badge that you're putting on that's running along the sides of the, Ben mentioned to this. These are, he said it already, they bring expertise, they bring mentoring, they work with companies. I think Rob actually uses video as well.
NVIDIA.
Yeah. So it's a real benefit of the challenge calls that were funded in that vein. I think something approaching half of them in video were involved with. So it's real. We've done stuff with Amazon as well. So a lot of stuff from external support and sort of gearing.
And I think you've slightly cued the challenge for the future, if you like, to end it up. All of the projects here attracted other funding from other sources, private investment, further development funding, because we created a framework that allowed other people to plug in. Clearly, as the public money for MyWorld tapers, so how do we use that framework to draw other people in, and how do we become a vehicle for other people's ambitions and continue the momentum that we've got? And that for us, I suppose, is the next 12 months of work, because the legacy has to be not that this stops, but that this becomes an engine that other people can invest in because it already exists.
I think the one thing, of everything that we've done, which is probably the most powerful and the most difficult to sustain, without centralised intervention, is the secondary funding, is that flexible money that we've spoken about. We run local competitions that take into account local priorities, but in a global context. It's difficult to see where that money comes from without it being centrally funded. I think, it's not about, you're not sustaining yourself. That's the wrong question. It's about how central government spends its money wisely. We're in a position where, you've got a single tech giant, let's say Google, spending 4 times themselves as an individual company, spending 4 times the amount of the whole UKI budget, $40 billion a year compared to £9 billion. So, we can't compete financially, we've got a box clever, and I think, show the potential that we can do that through these sort of schemes.
Smart and agile, don't want to end on they've got $30 billion to spend. Right, we're running out of time, but we have run out of time. There are a number of MyWorld people in the room. Hands up, please. So we will be around afterwards. I think we have to leave this room, but if you have any questions, please grab any of us. We're very happy to share our kind of learnings. The programme will continue going for another 12, 15 months. We have a very, very lovely facility in Bristol that you're all invited to come and base yourselves out whenever you want. And in Bath. Sorry. You saw her on the stage earlier.
Let's get it right.
Right. There's no tension. Partners bring joy, not complexity. So thank you all for joining us. I really appreciate you coming out. Thanks.